What is up, ladies and gentle nerds? It's your boy Graham, also known as Hamhawks42, and this episode is brought to you by the dedication to put one of these things out every freaking day, even though the last one that I just recorded got completely lost. Ugh. Anyway, it's all good. It's all good. That one has some decent points, but you know what? This one's going to be even better. So let's go ahead and click on that random card button. And for those of you at home, that it's a little peek behind the curtain. Anyway, so we have a lost episode. Yay! It's kind of one of those podcast things, right? Cool. So we are looking at Corpse Cur. This is a 2/2 for 4 artifact creature hound. All right, so it's a 2/2 for 4. Not a great, but it is an artifact creature, so it's free. Now, it has a couple interesting details associated with it. Specifically, this card has Infect. Dun dun dun. I think this is the first Infect creature that we've hit on Overthinking MTG, and I gotta say, Infect is a fascinating card. Well, fascinating concept, fascinating ability on cards. Because if a creature has Infect, then they deal their damage to other creatures as -1/-1 counters. So it saps away their power and their toughness is reduced, therefore they effectively don't regenerate at the end of the turn like they normally would. Um, yeah, so it's really nasty. Now, that's not even the worst part. To be honest, most of the time, that's not even a factor when it comes to infect. Here's the part that really stinks. When a creature with infect hits a player, the player is given a poison counter. And if they reach 10 poison counters, they lose the game. Yeah, it's bananas. Now, that alone is probably enough. 2/2 with infect for 4. That's a solid creature. Now, the Corpse Cur has some additional text on it. When Corpse Cur enters the battlefield, you may return target creature card with infect from your graveyard to your hand. So it's infect tribal synergy. That's disgusting. Like, it's beautiful, but it's disgusting. Yeah, Corpse Cur is one of those creatures that I know I don't usually think of when I think of Infect because Infect is one of those effects that there's some people who absolutely love it because it's this weird, different alternate win con, and you can use things like proliferate in order to tick up poison counters. And so in like Atraxa decks, you can do stuff where you're infecting your opponents and then just ticking them up, and you can win that way very easily. You also have cards like Triumph of the Hordes, which is an instant that gives all of your creatures infect. I believe it's an instant. It might be a sorcery, but it gives all of your creatures like +2/+2 and infect or something like that. It's an overrun effect, but infect is tagged in there too. So it's one of the few ways to really win in Commander with an aggro strategy, other than Craterhoof Behemoth. That's the other thing, of course. Yeah, so Infect is one of those. It is kind of under scrutiny a little bit right now because I know there's a lot of dialogue going on around a bunch of different content creators about whether or not Commander, as it stands today, should be changed. That's something that is a recurring theme in a lot of different mediums, and I believe I could be mistaken. I know it's part of the conversation, but I think it started with a few weeks ago. Actually, was it a few months ago now? At this point, I'm recording this in quarantine, and I have no idea what time is anymore. But I'm pretty sure, I believe it was at least a month ago, maybe two. Mark Rosewater, in a podcast that he records on his drive to work, he actually listed a bunch of details that he would like changed about Commander because it in his opinion, the format isn't really living into the spirit that was intended, and he'd like to see it changed. And he recommended a few things that he believes could change it. And he discussed a few other topics that people bring up around this subject, and one of them was infect. And so it's funny because Marco Rosewater actually has a lot of opinions about Commander, as in he admittedly doesn't play it that much, but his he has a couple of hills he's willing to die on, but interestingly enough, Infect was not one of them. He actually was defending Infect. Now, the concern that people have is right now with a standard 60 card one-on-one 20 life total duel, you have to deal 10 infect damage to your opponent in order to kill them with infect. Okay, they have to get 10 poison counters, and their starting life total is 20. Now in Commander, your starting life total is 40, but 10 poison counters is still the number. That's still the magic number you have to reach. And I think there seems to be this outcry, or a lot of people are trying to get that changed. Yeah, the preference seems to be to go to 20 poison counters in order for infect to kill an opponent. And Mark Rosewater Morrow made some interesting points in the Drive to Work podcast. And the one thing that he commented on is that aggro strategies in Commander are very, very weak because combo strategies generally use fewer resources to create a more powerful result that can scale to a four-person game better than a lot of other strategies. And running an aggro strategy, trying to create enough board presence to beat three people with creatures attacking is very difficult. And Infect is one of the few ways where, regardless of how much life has been gained, regardless of what's going on, you can you can deal 10 damage with creatures, especially with things like Triumph of the Horde that give a large portion of your squad, a large portion of your creatures. In fact, it makes sense. So Corpse Cur here um, is an interesting part of that. And so the argument to reduce or to increase the number to 20 poison counters to kill a player, Mark Rosewater basically just said that's not really in fitting with the truth is aggro's weak enough that them having one avenue that makes sense is it makes sense. It's fine at 10. And I'm inclined to agree actually. I have yet to really get blown out by Infect. I have died to it. It's true. Skithiryx is a monster. And Skithiryx is a dragon that adds poison counters. Um, yeah, I believe it's 5/5 flyer with infect for I think 6 or 7. Like it's very good. Um, Corpse Cur here is kind of your straight down the middle infect creature. So it's a 2/2 for 4 artifact creature. Incidentally, it's a hound. I don't know if that type is going to be relevant. And I find it interesting that its type is a hound, because the image or the creature that's depicted looks pretty similar to a xenomorph from Aliens. It's on all fours. It has a elongated head, doesn't have any clear eyes to speak of. Very predatory. It's moving very fast in this image. Like the background is blurred. Like this is clearly. I mean, it looks like yeah, some kind of really twisted alien dog, which kind of makes sense because this came out. Infect is a mechanic that we see a lot from New Phyrexia, which is the Scars of Mirrodin, like that block. And actually, it's one of those where, given my given my impact with the game, given my relationship with Magic, it was kind of fun because I got to explore Mirrodin when it was pure, when it was new, when it was fresh, when it was shiny, and it was really special and really nice. And then I went away from the game, and when I came back, it had been corrupted, and it really that was an interesting experience as I felt very much like someone who had been away on a long journey to come back to find um, it was the scouring of the Shire, if you will. It's like, oh, the parts of the past that I loved, that I connected with, even these have been affected, even these have been touched by this force. That's the other thing, actually. Speaking of, i- that's something that we see in Magic story that we don't see in a lot of other fiction that I really enjoy. Sometimes in Magic, there will be a long stretch of story arcs. You'll have, in some cases, multiple novels, in some, other cases, articles on the website. Um, Whatever, I know the story's going through some changes right now, so who knows what we'll get in the future. But the thing that was really, really cool about that story is sometimes the bad guys just won. There were times where no matter how hard the good guys fought, no matter how much they tried, sometimes the bad guys just freaking won. And unless I'm mistaken, on Mirrodin, the bad guys just straight up won. The Yeah, they've just completely consumed that entire plane, and it's really impressive. It's really insane. And now, as a result, we all have to deal with Vorinclex and EDH. But hey, that is what it is. Um, yeah, it's fun. And so this is kind of the least busted version of Infect. It's fairly priced because you do get the added bonus of because Infect behaves differently than normal damage, it makes sense that it would cost a little bit extra. So like a 2/2 for 3, say with Infect, I think would be fair. In this particular case, 2/2 for 4 with basically it's a Gravedigger for Infect creatures. Yeah, it's an Infect Gravedigger. That's cool. And if you have an opponent who finally did manage to get rid of your Blightsteel Colossus, which Blightsteel Colossus is like the premier um, infect creature. And actually, come to think of it, now that I'm finally putting the pieces together, it's a beautiful representation of Mirrodin being consumed by Phyrexia. Because if you take the Blightsteel Colossus and compare it to the Darksteel Colossus, now the Darksteel Colossus is an 11/11 with Trample for 11 that when it is put into your graveyard, you have to shuffle it back into your library. So it's a good card. It is absolutely. And it's indestructible. How could I forget? It's indestructible. Then you have the Blightsteel Colossus, which is an 11/11 for 11 with trample that is indestructible. That when it goes into your graveyard, you need to shuffle it back into your library, and it has infect. It's the exact same card, but with infect. And the thing about Blightsteel Colossus that makes it especially nasty is if you have a way of giving it haste, it's an 11/11 with infect. It can give a player 11 poison counters. They only need 10 to lose the game. So if you can hit with Blightsteel Colossus if your opponent doesn't have blockers down for Blightsteel Colossus and you swing in, you win the game. It's that simple. Well, Corpse Cure is not going to give you that. However, if you're Blightsteel Colossus, I mean, it shuffles back into your library, so you probably aren't going to ever get a chance to actually pull that with Corpse Cure now that I think about it, unfortunately, because that'd be pretty sweet. But your Skithiryx, that could actually absolutely come back. There are a lot of other infect creatures out there that are pretty impressive. Yeah, so this is cool. It's a nice little card. If you're going to be building around infect creatures specifically, like if you're going to full on build an infect tribal, Corpse Cure is a solid inclusion. It will give you exactly what you need. Plus, the fact that it is completely colorless gives you all the options in the world, so that's pretty nice. Yeah, no matter what other support package you have around it, this guy can just slot in. So that's pretty cool. The other thing you can use it for is establishing poison counters on players, or -1/-1 counters on decks if you're running with a lot of proliferate stuff. And so that could fit into a green deck that's running proliferate with +1/+1 counters, and it can just kind of be a little splash of infect to shake things up a little bit. Um, Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, if people don't like playing with infect in your play group because they've gotten blown out by Triumph of the Hordes, or a Blightsteel Colossus coming in on a sneak attack, Corpse Cure could be a way to add infect to the game that feels a little more fair. That could be a little interesting without those feel bad moments of, man, I just stabilized. I felt like I was doing really well, and now I'm just dead. That's the thing. That's the thing about infect that I think there are a lot of feel bad moments. Um, Strictly tied to moments when people got blown out and they weren't expecting it. I think that's all it is, because that's not a great play experience. And I think that's really the only issue with Infect. I think from a design perspective, it's perfectly fine. Like if Triumph of the Hordes didn't exist, you wouldn't have anybody complaining about the Infect rules. Just straight up, nobody. I mean, Blightsteel Colossus, maybe some people would get pissy about, but all in all, like I feel like Infect is fine. It can be very aggressive. It can be a real pain. Um, and in a one-on-one kind of situation, yeah, Infect is pretty nasty. Like if I was gonna go one-on-one commander, Infect would be awful. But in a four-person pod, eh, I feel like you can work with it. You can manage it. Anyway, but yeah, so Corpse Cur, interesting. It's an interesting creature from New Phyrexia. And yeah, it's all kinds of bad news. This thing is nasty. I also like it. The creature that's depicted in this artwork is really horrifying. I gotta say, I definitely don't want to be messing with this thing. Yeah, no, bad news. Anyway, guys, thanks for coming out. I appreciate it. So this has been take two of episode number 58 of the Overthinking MTG podcast. Yeah, you're all the best. I'll catch you next time.